What's up, everybody? We're back. Episode 2, The Last of Us. We're here. We're going to talk about this episode today. We're super excited to be back this week. This year we're really trying to get our content out for you guys, really trying to get involved. We're super excited, especially, again, it's a show I think we can all agree we're really enjoying, right? Right?
Oh yeah.
I think so.
Oh yeah.
Okay, good. As always, I'm here with my two amazing other co-hosts. I'm here with Brian. How you doing, Brian?
Marcelo, I am doing fantastic. Another week, another great episode. I can't wait to talk about it. It's going to be a fucking blast.
Yep. And also, right next to him, my boy Joel. How you doing, Joel? Acoustic Avenger.
What's up, everybody? I just want to say, little disclaimer. I kind of don't remember one of the characters, so this was a good refresher for me. This episode was wild. So, but let's get into it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think episode 2 again is building onto how much we enjoyed of episode 1. We're still getting a lot of video game similarities, but I think we're finally starting to get a little bit of separation from the source content, if we will, right? A little bit things change, but again, I think that the changes, and we'll talk about it more in detail, but I think that these changes for the context of a TV show make a ton of sense, right? Like I just rewatched in between episode 1 and up to this week. I rewatched the whole playthrough of The Last of Us 1, and it was really interesting to see again just all the similarities between the video game and the show, and being able to kind of pick apart the differences that are there, that are present. And yeah, I mean, I remember this part of the game very well. It's a very, really good part of the game. And so seeing again those differences makes a huge, it's really great to see. So I'm really excited about it, and can't wait to talk about it with you guys.
Oh, for sure. Like you said, this is like one of the pivotal like moments in just like the story, because like we're just like, I know we're gonna go into spoilers, but like this is the beginnings of the Joel and Ellie team up, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
you know and like you said, there's a lot of differences in the story, but they all still kind of work and make sense. um we're gonna talk about this a lot, but like the intro to this episode is just another like really really good place setter
Mm-hmm.
for what you're about to jump into, and I hope that they keep kind of going on with this, because it does such a great job of kind of explaining how the world is more, but then also just a great way to kind of prepare you for what you're about to see in this episode. And I can't wait. I know. Before we get into spoilers, Joel, what'd you think?
Um, it was good. That intro, I was like, wow. I like how they just, like you were saying, they're fleshing out the world and what's gonna happen, and the solution. Like they contact like a very well informed scientist. It's like, what do you do against an infection when XYZ don't work? And then of course she like drops the most.
Well, we're not in spoilers yet.
I was gonna just skate the line here. She just drops like the ultimatum of ultimatums, and
Yeah, I mean, I told you this weekend, Brian, when we saw each other, that what I'm really enjoying about the show versus the game is that because we're really fleshing out the world, like what everybody else was doing. Like we got a glimpse of the past in this episode in the very beginning. Last episode we got a little bit of in between stuff between Ellie and everything that she was doing up to right before she met Joel and stuff. And it's just something that I really appreciate, and I didn't think I would appreciate. But again, having just like the playthroughs are fresh in my mind, so it's like I definitely know what's coming up. But because they're really fleshing it out, it's super nice to see. You get more intention out of it, right? Like you see why people are the way they are. You see, you resonate, I think, a little bit more with these people. So yeah, I mean, with that said, unless you guys have any, oh, actually, you know what, psych, Did you guys know, or did you guys see that since episode 1 and 2, there's been like a huge uptick in purchases for The Last of Us 1? I think it was like
I did see that.
300% or something like
I saw
that.
that.
So from what I heard, it was like 320 some percent for part one, and
Mm-hmm.
then I don't know if this was around the world or just like in the UK, but there's also a big increase in sales for the remastered version for the PS4. So like this
Nice.
show is working for
Yeah.
what for what
Mhm.
it's slightly supposed to do as a vehicle for the property. Um, but also even for episode 2, I believe there was even an increase in viewership for episode 2 compared to last week,
Interesting.
which was already one of HBO's biggest like premiere releases.
Mm.
Yeah.
So
Do you think? I mean, this all obviously it's opened up the world to a lot of people. It's made it accessible to a lot of people who probably would have never picked up the game, right? And it's like, oh shit, I want to go back and kind of see what this game is about.
oh yeah, and you know it's just so perfect that just a few months ago we got the re-release of part 1 for the PS5.
Yeah.
So it's ready and
So
waiting to go.
I'm even now like kind of like questioning. I we talked last week too about this. So I was like, I don't like horror games. I don't play these kind of games, but I'm like, am I willing to brave this? And I think I might have to do that as one of my first streams on a different channel, maybe, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe. But we'll see. I'm
It's
super excited. Yeah,
I think the story is definitely well worth getting a little, peeing your pants a little bit.
yeah. All right, so let's get into this. If
Let's
you're
go.
listening now, haven't seen episode 2, I don't know what you're doing here. We're glad that you're here, but again, pause the episode, go watch episode 2, and then come back and hit play on us
Mhm.
because we're about to dive into some spoilers. We're
Big
gonna
time.
move into spoilers. We're gonna talk about the episode. We're gonna spoil the episode, and
Move
now we're going into
forward.
spoilers. All right, let's go. Episode
Yeah.
2 starts out 2003.
Bruh.
We're in Indonesia. We're kind of seeing what's going on here, and we run into is it Ibu? I don't excuse me if I'm butchering this name, but it's Ibu Ratna, right? She is a professor who specializes in mycology, right?
Yep.
Yes.
And she has been called for her specialty, which, she is very confused because she considers herself to be so unimportant, like have no say in like major, bigger things.
Hmm.
And we run into a body which they are claiming, kind of looks like this person's laying on the table and they have a
Right.
bite. Yeah.
Yeah. Um just to like give him props, like even before we get into like the meat of this little section, just props to the set design team for again well portraying very well just the era that they decided to choose, like 2003. Because if you guys forget, in 2003 there was the big SARS epidemic, and what do you see when they start entering that facility? You see posters about, warnings about like what happens if you like contract SARS or something like that, or like the warnings of like the SARS epidemic. It's like, bruh, I don't know. I just appreciate the fine details that people kind of would just like skim over, you know, because like we're fuck. It's like 20. It's been 20 years since 2003. So like who is gonna like pay attention to that shit? So it's just kind of, for me, it's just kind of cool that they are paying attention to like what was happening during that time.
Yeah, really interesting. So, we see her, they bring her to an infection, they bring her to a person who's been infected or has been attacked by patient 0, right?
Hmm.
And I think this actually takes place days before it hits Texas. I think the date is like 3 or 4 days before it actually is already in Texas. So at that point,
Yeah.
you just can't do anything, right? So, she cuts in and, looks at it and it looks like fungus and then opens the mouth and notices those tendrils sticking out, right? That was wild. Like that looked crazy. She immediately like backed the fuck up. She was like, nope. And basically, she's talking to the general or the military official there. And she's just like, yeah, there's nothing we can do. Like, you know what you can do? You can bomb this city. Just bomb it. That's the solution. Just wipe it out. Like,
Bruh. And just like the situation, because legit, like they're in the office and she's like sitting down. The lieutenant like gave her like a cup of tea, and like she starts asking questions like, oh, you know, like she would like like she was just a normal person working at the factory, pretty average, and then one day she just like goes ballistic and starts attacking people. She like bit 4 people, and then they locked her in the bathroom to kind of keep her down, and then the police ended up having to shoot her and like kill her because she was out of control. And it was like, oh yeah, and there's like 14 people still missing from the factory. And she's like, what the? And then it's like, okay. And it's like, how long has this happened? It's like, oh, this was like 30, it's like 30 hours ago. So it's like a little over a day ago. And it's just like, okay, we need to bomb the city. It's like, what's the solution? Like, there's no vaccines for this shit. Like, you need to bomb the city right now. And like, you notice at that point, before she even says it, it's like her hand starts to shake. It's like, it's such a
yeah,
funny detail. Like, this
yeah, she's terrified.
just puts down the teacup and he's like, I would like to be the driven home so I can be with my family.
Yeah,
Because
like
she
she knows.
she knows that it's done. They're fucked. But it's like the only way you could possibly help stop the spread is just bomb the entire city.
Hmm.
So what did you think, Joel? I mean, how do you react to seeing something like that? Like, what you're looking at and you know that there's no solution. Like, I would be the same. Just take me home. Like, I want to be with my family for as long as I can. This is it. Like, that's all we can do. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I just same way, and just her visceral like you have to literally blow everyone up. That just like hit me hell hard, and I want to see go see my family, and it's like the finality of her comments. I was just like, fuck, it really hit me, and it's just like damn, and then and then it cuts to the opening credits, and it's just like boom, for
Yeah, it
real,
just throws you right in.
right? And it was oh, wow, it
And
was yeah.
I don't know if you guys like thought of this, but the moment when she heard like how long ago it was and like there's like people missing, and she starts to realize, oh no, like we're fucked. Did you guys think back to the first episode when they had that opening of that interview from the 60s?
Mm-hmm.
And having John Hamm's character basically saying it's like, hey, if the fungus decides to fucking evolve, we're
It's
fucked.
gonna do what it wants. Yeah, it's gonna do
Yeah.
what it wants.
And I just remember the moment which like her hands started to shake and like put the like out of fear and like put the cup down. Like in my brain, I was like, oh, she's thinking about that.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure like that's her field. So I'm assuming at some point she had to watch that interview.
Yeah.
It's just like very nicely building from the previous episode, and then it's just like there's nothing we could do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's such like it creates that like sense of hopelessness. It's like, and then of course you see what they did to all the other like cities
Yeah.
around the
Yep. So
world.
now we're back. We're back with the team. We're back with Tess, Joel, Ellie. They've just escaped from Boston, and now Joel wants to go back. He wants to try to find another way to get this going. He doesn't want it, and in very Joel fashion, just is done with it. Doesn't want to deal with it. Doesn't want to do anything. And Tess, I think, finally coming around and really believing that Ellie is not infectious and that she is immune, is trying to convince Joel otherwise. And of course, well, what are you going to do? So they kind
Hmm.
of decide and say, all right, well, Ellie knows that she was supposed to be taken west. That's all she knows. There's a camp out west that I need to go to, so that's where we're going. And Tess, convinces Joel to go.
Yeah, I just want to point out the hilarity when they decide to eat and like Tess and Joel are just like eating like some of like just they're eating some jerky and stuff, and all of a sudden Ellie pulls out this like fucking nicely made chicken sandwich
Yeah.
that probably Marlene fucking made, or one of the Fireflies made for Ellie. It's like, what the fuck? She's it's like, how long was that in her bag? And
Mhm.
because like you have to imagine that stuff doesn't like what's the shelf life on like chicken, you know?
Yeah.
It's like how long were you expecting that to last for? I don't
I'm
understand.
sure it was from like, I mean, I can't, I think it's only been a couple days. I mean, it can't be that much longer. It's probably fresh enough, from when she was given that sandwich. So,
Yeah.
hey man, it's the apocalypse. What do you do?
Right.
So we venture out. We kind of see, the major city. You saw that the city got bombed, and Joel talks about how they had bombed every major city, which
Mhm.
is, I mean, talk about like crazy action, right? Like all of a sudden, like San Francisco, oh, this is going on. Oh, we got to bomb it. Like,
Bruh, just imagine like if that were to happen. How it's like I can understand like a whole bunch of places like getting carpet bombs. Like just imagine what you would have to do to like big cities like that
mm-hmm,
to even think that you've made a dent in the
Mhm.
spread. But just like this the overall shot that they've like gave like this whole city, right? Because this is like it's like you're looking at Boston or like what used to be Boston, and so it's just like okay, you know, a little shout out to just like again because I believe they filmed all of this in Vancouver.
mm,
They filmed in Canada,
some stuff, yeah.
um, but of course, there's a little bit of green screen work just for like the destruction, but it's like they pretty much used a lot of practical stuff for these shots, and just like the blending of just like the practical and then like this green screen special effects just works so well in this scene, and
Yeah.
like it was terrifyingly beautiful,
Mhm.
if I could say. I think that's like the best way to describe a lot of like what The Last of Us is. It's a terrifyingly beautiful like scenery.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we're heading along, and in this whole process, for us now, it's supposed to be a 10-minute walk, but with the buildings and the destruction and everything the way it is, of course, it becomes it becomes a much bigger like trek, right? Now you got to go up a building and over a building and stuff, and so they're walking. Ellie's talking about how she was infected and how long it was, and how she was like the only one that survived from her friends, and that she's just always been like an orphan, right? So, curious again that the city kind of quiet, not really nothing going on, pretty chill, all things
You
considered.
can say that, yeah.
Yeah. And so here we finally hit the hotel part, right? And I laughed really hard at this scene because I thought it was gonna be um uh like she's over here making a ton of noise, like she's ringing bells and stuff, and I'm like, dude,
Right.
like what are you doing? And so I thought that was like, oh man, like uh uh
She's
yeah. And is this
she's just being a kid, you know.
Mhm.
yeah, and was this the scene also where she talked where it's kind of flooded? Yeah, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is
Right
pretty
before they go up the building.
Yeah, so this is pretty much one of those scenes that was kind of taken from the game where they're going into the hotel and like Ellie's fucking around a little bit, but then you come to the realization where some of the bottom floor is flooded.
Mm-hmm.
There's water. And then that's when Ellie's like, "Oh, I don't know how to swim." It's
So
just like
I was waiting for I was waiting for the scene where where he grabs the pallet in the video game and has to like drag it and it's just like clunky, I was waiting for him to do the pallet stuff, which I thought was really funny. I'm wondering if we'll get something like that farther along in this game.
oh, probably. But I just loved the part where Joel's like, figure it out, and like he purposefully does like this motion, being like, "Hey, this is how high the water goes,"
Yep.
and now he's like, "Oh, okay."
Right when she rings the bell, my wife actually jumped with that little skeleton. It came out.
Oh my god, really?
Yeah,
That's so funny.
yeah, and so did my sister. I just want to say though, I really love the overgrowth. Like they've done that so well with we were talking about the city and how like beautiful it looks, and even like the animals inside the hotel. It's like, oh, that's a nice touch before some bad shit happens. So I just, good job, set design and everything. And oh, man,
Yeah.
like that first little jump scare, I was like, nope, this is not it. They're making too much noise. There's gonna be something later. I was like,
It's almost like it was meant, like it was almost like as though something was supposed to happen there, right? Like they
hey,
really set it up really well.
Mhm. It's an
So
appetizer.
there's this brief moment when they're kind of climbing up the building, trying to figure a way out of it, where Ellie and Joel kind of start to talk to each other a little bit, try to
Mhm.
kind of talk about, you know, uh, you know, uh, Ellie asks Joel about having killed the infected before, and kind of asks about uh, any type of regrets, especially like with the guard that they just killed, like the night before or whatever. So it's
Mhm.
just interesting to see again that this relationship building uh, that really, I mean, again with the game and stuff, it really does blossom
Mhm.
in a really great way, which I'm super excited to see, especially since if season one is all of part one, there's still a lot that needs to happen.
Oh yeah,
Um, so much. So,
yeah.
yeah,
Sorry,
go ahead.
I just wanted to bring this up. I love how, because I believe Neil Druckmann is the one that directed this episode, but
Hmm.
they even did this in Craig did this in the first episode too. But even though they've had to change this because you can't have like gameplay in a TV show, they're still finding ways to kind of insert some of those game mechanics into their scenes.
Are you talking about
Um,
the loading scene when he's moving the bookcase?
or when he's moving the bookcase from the door when they're leaving their resting place, or like before this scene is because Tess had to go through some rubble to kind of open up try to figure out a way through, and you have Joel doing the like boost up thing, which is something like you always do in the game. You like boost up
Yep.
Ellie or you boost up Tess, and it's like they keep finding ways to like put in a little bit of like gameplay mechanics into the show, but it works. And it's great.
I'm always like, ah. They press triangle or whatever, whatever
Mhm.
control it was.
Still waiting to see Joel throw down his backpack and craft something real quick. I'm
he,
still waiting
he
for that.
put a shiv together. Yeah. Joel, are you thinking you're gonna stream this game, or are you gonna play, or are you gonna try to play it like on your own?
um, my wife and I are gonna play it together, so that's gonna be fun. We'll probably record it and at least stream parts of it.
Cool.
Um, and as I said earlier, like I don't remember a lot of Tess. I know we're gonna get into it, so this for me was super fresh as far as I remember. I definitely remember the Joel and Ellie parts, like for sure. But this episode, I was like, what goes on and what happens later? And it's just some stuff that really falls into place. And
Yeah, she was a
Mhm.
part of this for the first couple hours of the game, actually, like maybe the
yeah,
first 2 hours or something of the game. Like she was in it for a decent
So
bit.
in the game, pretty much after the whole situation in the past with Sarah, like once you do that time forward, you're with Tess until later on, like we'll be talking about in this episode, but like that whole chunk of the game, you're with Tess pretty much all the time.
yeah. So for me, this was super fresh. Like either I didn't see it or I forgot. So just seeing their three interaction was just super interesting. And again, like we when he lifts Tess up, we get that like you were saying, Marcel, that first interaction of Joel and Ellie with what's to come. And then in the back of my head, I was like, what the Like I'm just like the gears are spinning. I was like, wait a second. But I'm not mistaken, is the next part the museum, right? Is that
Yeah, we'll get there. So, they get outside, and this is when Tess
that's right.
mentions about like the cordyceps and stepping on on a piece of it
Dude, what a
will
scene.
will attract others, right? Now, is this and I know I just watched the playthrough, but is this a deviation from the game?
So, this whole theory about like the network of the cordyceps
Mm-hmm.
is all TV show. So this is something they didn't actually really touch on in the game, but I don't know. For me, this is like really cool and interesting, and it's like
Yeah,
it's one of those things where I kind of wish it was in the game. I mean, who knows? Whenever part 3 comes out, they might do something with it. Who knows? But yeah,
but
this is
it makes sense, right?
oh, it
Like
makes perfect sense. And for how they had to change what the the infected are,
yeah,
it makes them even more terrifying because it's like, oh,
yeah.
if you fuck up in one little instance, a whole horde could just be coming at you. Because
Mhm.
like the
Yeah.
whole idea is like you fuck with you fuck with a piece of like the fungus in one area, and it'll send a message like miles away to like
Hmm.
a whole horde, and they'll know where to go and they know where to find you, and they'll just come running.
So, knowing that and kind of seeing how it plays out in this episode, uh, I would much rather be in the Walking Dead universe than in this universe.
I've seen so many TikToks of that. It's like, thank goodness.
um, so, it's a little bit of foreshadowing for what's about to happen. Now we go to the famous encounter, which every person who's played this game, I'm sure, had a really hard time with. It's they hit the museum. It looks like it's overgrown, but they're like, "Fuck it, we have no other way around." Um, and they're getting through. Shit's going, and then they hear that clicking, which,
Oh
again,
my
if you've
god.
played this game, if you're a fan of this game, and you know what happens, this is your first encounter with a clicker. And I remember a lot of playthroughs where so it took some people some time to get through that. Again, clickers are blind. They can't see you.
Hmm.
They can hear you, and their clicking is like bat echolocation.
Oh no.
Kind of bad radar.
Except it's cooler and terrifying.
Yeah.
So this is definitely something out of Dr. Morbius, best movie ever. So, they're I'm just
Tron 3
Cancel
over
the
here.
episode. Like, we're
Yeah.
done.
All right.
and all right, we're done. Um so tell me, guys, what did you guys think about the clicker design? What did you guys think about the sound design? I thought it was, of course, me being me, I thought it was all amazing. Great costume work. It was great sound design. It was man, it was so good.
Perfectly well executed. Honestly, this it was as awesome as it was terrifying, and I'm glad they just brought it to life. And what they do with it was dope too. But Brian, you've experienced it more than us. Lend us
Bruh,
your thoughts.
I was having flashbacks. Like they the clickers were so good in this episode. I'm so glad how they turned out cuz I legit was watching this whole sequence, and I was having flashbacks of like me playing Last of Us for the first time, and just like experiencing that like terror of like, okay, I need to like be as quiet as I can to get through, or like figure out a way to like take them out, or just like sneak by. Um but the moment I was like all in on what they're doing with the clickers, it was the moment where they're all kind of like hiding behind like a display case, and then you see the one kind of come from like in the background, and you can kind of see it like walking around, and the moment it did its like, not really like a yell, but it made that loud noise, and like it was
Hmm.
lurching forward with his arms back, and I was like, bruh, it's just like it's just like the clickers. It's like in action and like in fucking real life. It's like the clickers are here, they're real. Now, Marcelo, I mentioned before we started recording, I had some fun facts, and I have two for this particular sequence. So, according to the companion podcast, the design team for the show, the clickers was one of the first things they started working on. Like even like before like shooting was like happening, like the clickers were like their like main priority.
Yeah.
And I believe I'm probably misremembering, but I believe they said that they went over like maybe like 50 so designs when they were testing it out. And then they ended up actually going back to like more of a like the original design almost to
Mm-hmm.
like a T.
Yeah.
And pretty much what you saw was all practical.
Nice.
What we
It
like to see in TV.
Mm-hmm.
and it was just wild. And another fun fact is that apparently they got some actors that were big fans of the game to come play the role of the clickers. And so it's like they were just big super fans of The Last of Us, so like they were able to actually fully just get into the character and like do all the clicker things that they did it so well. Um they're also um that scene I was just talking about when they're on the glass or like
Hmm.
the and then Joel is like motioning to Ellie. It's like, "Hey, be quiet." Like they can't see and stuff like that. Apparently, that was a reshoot
Interesting.
because originally, remember before when they're on the overpass,
Hmm.
like on the freeway, and they're mentioning is I heard there's like some of them that you know have really good hearing, like they almost have like bat like hearing, and they're kind of referencing like the clickers, right?
Yeah.
Apparently, they originally thought that was enough information to have people understand how the clickers work. And then after some screen testing, they realized that no, there's some people that are going to have that go over their head. So they had them come back into the studio to film that scene to have Joel just like motion to Ellie. It's like, "Hey, watch out. Like they can hear really well." And I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. It's just like
Yeah, I mean, such a tiny little nuanced motion, but it like really helps with understanding the danger that you're in, right? Like you
oh
can
yeah.
see like what's going on. And kind of back to that really quick, back to that kind of overpassing. They also touched on the ones that spit stuff.
Oh,
So I was like, ooh, we're gonna get bloaters here. Probably next
bloaters.
episode is the
Yep.
bloater. So that's a big chungus right there. That's a big guy. Um, and so that'll be interesting to see too. I wonder how much practical work's going to be for that. Um, so in the midst of that first clicker fight, we find out Ellie's been scratched, right? And everybody starts to freak out as Joel. Of course, I mean it's pretty natural. I mean you've been dealing with this for 20 years. Of course, you're not just gonna let it go by the wayside, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So they wrap her up and they're gonna keep an eye on her. And
Just the line that she says is like, "Well, if it had to be any of us, it might as well
Right.
have been me."
oh my gosh! And then she starts like acting like she's turning, and it's like really. Oh, so yeah. I really hate that Bella Ramsey's getting as much hate as she's getting for playing this character. She's doing such an amazing job, guys.
And
She fits the character so well, and her character in Game of Thrones was such a badass. Like, why wouldn't Ellie
Lady
is such a
Mormont,
badass character?
dude.
Yeah, why wouldn't she be the same character? Like, she's a great actress. She's doing such a good job. I just want to throw it out there that I hate that she's getting as much hate
It's a
as
bunch
she's
of
getting, but people are gonna bitch just because she doesn't look like the character from the game. What are you supposed to do?
it's just a bunch of internet bros, complaining to complain,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
you know.
So now we've reached the state house, and this is a total opposite direction deviation from the game, right? In the video game, Joel, I don't know if you remember, but in the video game, rather than there being the infected that are at the state house, it's actually Fedra agents that catch up to them, and it becomes like this huge gunfight, right? So, the infected are coming. They rush into the state. They see all the fireflies there are dead, right? They're dead. They're infected. Whatever. So they just kind of run into the state house. There's just like holding on to this little bit of hope that there's still people alive inside, and just everybody's dead, right? Everybody's dead.
So wild.
And this scene is so game accurate. The discussion between Joel, Tess about Ellie and her immunity. Of course, Joel finds out that Tess is infected, so in that whole scuffle with the clicker, she ends up getting scratched or bit or something like
She
that.
gets bit like
He was
right,
gone
Oh,
for a
right,
long
right
time.
here, right in her shoulder. Yeah. And we find out that it's already starting to spread. Like we see that she's already like a goner.
Yeah.
And Ellie, nothing. She's totally fine. And it's that reality that maybe she is actually immune, that maybe there is some hope for Ellie and coming up with a cure or whatever. And so as we reach the end of the episode, we start to realize, Tess is going to stay. She's not going to go. We see all of the infected start to rush the state building, and she's just like, you need to go. Like, you need to take her. You need to finish the job, right? And so begrudgingly, of course, Joel takes Ellie, and they take off, and the infected barge into the building, and we see this really crazy scene, which at first glance, is very kind of like, what is happening here right now? Like, why? Like the infected comes up to Tess and like sticks his tendrils in her mouth.
Yeah.
And a lot of people had a really interesting reaction to this, but I also kind of saw a lot of really kind of interesting takes on this scene that I kind of wanted to touch on.
Okay.
But so Tess, and so I'll jump back to that. But Tess sacrifices herself. Joel and Ellie are outside, and then the whole building blows up, right? And then that's the episode. And episode 3, we'll see what happens with Bill and that whole stuff, which was again a really fun part in the game. Just Joel interacting with other people in the world is always fun to see. But just really quick, again, I just wanted to talk, about your thoughts about that thing at the end, that like weird tendril in mouth kiss thing with Tess. Like, how did you guys feel about that? It's a very different way to kind of approach that. Just wanted to see kind of how you guys felt about it.
Go for it, Joel.
I just thought it was interesting how there are infected like running past Tess at first, right? They don't even notice her, and then there's as more trickle in, they do notice her, but they don't just straight away attack her. They're kind of like hesitant. So I'm wondering if they kind of knew she was almost already like succumbing to the infection, and then how that one infected approaches her and kind of just reaches into her with the tendrils and stuff. Like I'm essentially like hastening the process probably to like convert. That's the thought I had. And it's just we see it like in real time. Like I guess with that connection, it multiplies like 1,000-fold, like the takeover, right? Because she's like flicking the lighter, she's losing control, she can't drop it right away. It's getting harder, but eventually, with all the gas they spill and everything, it goes through and takes everyone with her. I just thought it was interesting. We haven't seen something like that. At least I haven't. Like the hive mind infection, like methodically, like, oh, we need to convert this thing super fast. Like this needs to happen quickly, as opposed to, oh, they're not fully 100% kill them, because that's usually it, right? Even if you're bit, the zombies still finish you off. It doesn't matter. This was more like, oh, another one for our army. That's
Exactly. So here, that was kind of where I was getting at a little bit. So everything that I kind of saw was that the reason it didn't attack Tess was because Tess wasn't attacking them, right? So it became this thing that they are going to attack whatever's trying to destroy like the brain trust, right? If you're killing one, I can only imagine with how this works that it could probably affect everything else, right? Like if one feels pain, does like every clicker feel, or does every infected feel pain? Who knows? We'll find out. But she didn't fight back, right? So it was just kind of this like, oh, we're assimilating you just because now you've kind of just given up. So just like, we're gonna kind of speed up the process or whatever. But I thought that was really interesting that 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 infected came up to her, looked at her, didn't attack or try to kill her or anything, and then just kind of, then the building blows up, so we don't see what happens. But uh, I love that. I thought that was a much more interesting way to kind of have Tess kind of killed off versus her fighting off like the Fedra agents and stuff like that.
Yeah. Boy, seeing that scene like first time, it was so bizarre. It was not what I was expecting, but I'm actually kind of on the side that thought it was actually pretty interesting. Um, like you say, like the runners are like coming in, and they're rushing like into like the whole building, but then you have that one that like stops and like turns, and like he's kind of like in the soft focus, so it's like you see it stop and just turn towards Tess, and
Mm-hmm.
then like say it's not running, it's not kind of like attacking, it just like comes closer to Tess. um and then yeah, I can understand why a lot of people were kind of weirded out by that scene, just because of how like weird it was, and it was like
Sure.
so like out of nowhere. It starts like pretty much like making out with Tess, and like like spreading the infection even more. um but it was just so weird because it's like the lighting they put onto it, so it made it look like it was like this weird
It was a weird romantic exchange.
like it was like a peaceful moment, but at the same time it was just like, so terrifying, and I think it adds on more to the idea of how threatening this whole situation is, just like how these infected like operate. And like you said, like they shot the one infected that sent a signal out to all of them to come towards this building and like rush everybody in it. um and then of course Tess, like knocking over all the canisters of like gasoline, and like putting grenades all around the floor. And then having that lighter and trying to light it, and it's not working, they start rushing in, and like she's kind of backed into a corner. um and while this one's like slowly just like infecting her more, it's like you can tell that she's trying as hard as she can, but you can tell that it's starting like to take hold. And like that last chance effort, like the last chance she had before like the infection just completely took over, she able to got the light and just like drop it, and then the whole thing bursts into flames and like explodes. But the I'm gonna keep like going back to the companion podcast. I still say, even though you listen to this podcast, but also listen to that podcast as well if you really like the show. They actually go, like Craig and Neil Druckmann actually go into like that whole sequence of like
Hmm.
just how weird it was, and it's like how they made it like this beautiful, bizarre, terrifying kind of like like scene. And they're talking about like why weren't they just straight up just attacking her, if they attack things on sight. And it was kind of like, Joel, you're actually getting to the kind of point that they were making, where it's like they don't attack people that are just there, and like it's like they're willing to give in, because the fungus, like the infection, they want to get more people like, infected, and
Right.
like
Mm.
add
Yeah.
on to their numbers. So if people are running away, they'll run and attack them, because they're resisting. But she's there, she's already infected, but she's not fighting back. So it's like, they're just like willingly just coming to her and just like, okay, you're one of us now. Like, we're going to make you one of us. Um, but Marcelo, I actually really agree. I kind of like this more than the game,
Yeah. Yeah.
because the show is how the show pivoted away from having Fedra be more involved, because in the game, like the Fedra is like so involved in the beginning half of the whole game, where this one, Fedra was there, but they're not the focus. They're really trying to make an effort to have like the clickers and the runners and the other infected be the more focus, or the bigger threat at this point in time, which is, I think, is a great move, because it helps the viewer, like even people that aren't familiar with like the property, to you know see how terrifying this world is and seeing how big of a threat that they can be.
Mhm.
And like, if like, I know you guys really haven't like played the game like thoroughly. You've seen the gameplay, but like in the game, like, yeah, you run into clickers every now and again, you run into runners, but you only see really big threats like every now and again in the game as far as
Yeah.
infected go. The other times you're fighting other people. And I'm
Mhm.
sure
Yeah.
I'm sure we're gonna get that in the show, but I think it services the story more if you show how big of a threat this infection can be. And having this scene with like Tess, I feel like was such like, I know people are going to disagree, but I truly believe this was actually like a really like interesting way to have her go out. Like, knowing that she's infected and her time is very limited, you know, having mostly the same kind of scene of her telling Joel, it's like, hey, you need to fucking wake up. Ellie might be our chance. And just, going out in that blaze, like literally in a blaze of glory. Or
Literally. Yeah.
maybe I know maybe glory is a little bit too much, because, the whole situation isn't, glorious at all. It's
Mhm.
fucking terrifying. But the the whole pacing, for the most part, besides like the whole switch between Fedra and the infected, it was mostly the same. The one thing that is a little different that I appreciate the show's doing, um, it really seems like they're going way into the show not tell, because in the game, um, Ellie doesn't get like cut again.
Yeah.
That was something just for the show, because in the show, Tess is able to pull, like, look at this, like, this cut isn't getting worse. You know, look at this. Like, it's already all fucked up and it's barely been like an hour.
Yeah.
Like, I am dying. She is fine. She is like our hope to maybe, have a better future, or at least have something good happen for once. And I know I'm kind of like bogarting this whole like this section right now, but I kind of wanted to pull back a little bit, because there is a scene that we didn't talk about. It's a scene after the museum when they're on the rooftop
Hmm.
and they have to take that little like plank bridge over. And if you played the game, you kind of figured it out at this point, but like that's like the sequence where Tess gets bit off screen, and you can kind of see that's where her demeanor starts to change when they're on that
Hmm.
rooftop. And Joel is being like his pessimistic self, being like,
Yeah.
it's like that was fucked up. It's like, I don't know, what are we gonna do with this now? Should we just go back? And like Tess actually like snaps on him.
Hmm.
He's like, Joel, can we just, have a win for once? Can we just like please like have this? And like you could see that Joel was like kind of like taken aback a bit. It's like, oh fuck. But it's because Tess was already in that mindset. It's like, I need to get these guys to where they need to go,
Yeah.
because I like, I'm not going to be here for that much longer. I need to make sure that they can get away. And of course you have the whole sequence on the rooftop with Joel and Ellie, and it's like very sweet. And that was pretty much shot for shot like the game. It was like a really
Yeah.
nice scene. But it's like having Tess go from that gruff, like, oh, I'm just like making my way through life the best I can, to having that kind of hope again, and like really making an effort to be like, hey, something good can happen. Let's try to make it happen.
I just want to say, for me not remembering that, definitely that transition where they're gonna walk that little plank. I was like, oh, something's off. Like Tess is totally like it's a big pivot, and I think for those who are familiar, right, it was like, oh, we know what happened, and I think for me, I was like, did it? Like for those who, so it was a good little transition. And when they're about to go down the ladder, I was like, oh, game transition. There, they show them going down. And I want to say a couple more things before we go back, but when they were in front of the state house a couple times, I thought actually the episode was done. I thought it was like, wow, we got the clickers, we're done. But no, I was like, oh, we're gonna keep going. I was like, oh shit. So I definitely was like, oh, here we go, here we go. And then just that Ellie calls it out. I think they're really showing. She's already smart, right? But like she's on it. She knows what's going on, and she's gonna be like a great companion to Joel. Whether he knows it or not. And I just can't wait to see the more original things they're gonna do. It's just done so well, and I felt like I was really spoiled with episode 1. We got 80 minutes of it, and it was good, right? And I just so good. And another one of our friends was telling me he's played it. Shout out to Nate. He's played it. He said like for that scene with Tess, it was a bigger emotional payoff too than what we got in the game.
Yeah, and luckily for you, episode 3 will also, I think, be 80 minutes long. And they're also, for everything that I'm seeing, is episode 3 will also have a huge deviation from the game. So we're starting to really break away now from kind of the source material. So I'm really excited to see what they're gonna do. I mean, we have some great characters coming up. Probably one of my favorite characters in the game, and yeah, I can't wait to talk about episode 3 next week. But we did it, guys. Episode 2.
Hey. If you'll enthuse me, Marcel, I do have one more fun fact.
Go for it, please.
At least for this episode. So the whole final sequence in the stateroom, or like the building house, that was filmed on a soundstage, and that entire room was all practical.
Very nice.
Nice.
Everything
I love that.
in there. And then and one thing I just remembered, kind of continuing on with like this whole like set design kick. In the first episode, the whole town in Texas. So apparently, when they're filming this in Canada, they actually bought property and bought houses
Huh.
from people in town to film in, or like at least like to rent out to like film in, and then the rest was built on site. So they literally built a neighborhood to film that intro scene on like
Wow.
Outbreak Day. Yeah, so
Wow.
so they're doing things right. They're doing what they can to make it practical, and it works. Like this show looks fantastic, and boy, I knowing what's coming up in the future, I can't wait to see what they do with it.
I know there's definitely some few very important key game moments that I can think of right now that I'm not going to talk about today because they just are huge major parts of this game, and I just don't want to even get into that until we get to it in the show. But there are definitely some scenes that I can't wait, and I kind of hope that they do touch on. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens. A couple more episodes, guys. We're doing it.
Oh yeah.
But thank you everybody for hanging out with us today. My name is Marcelo. You can find me on Twitter at M90Plays. Joel, where can we find you?
Bad Mech Monster Mine on SoundCloud and Spotify. Also Acoustic Avenger on Twitch. Acoustic Avenger on Twitter. The I is replaced with a 1. Brian?
And Brian, where can we find you?
Well, you can find me pretty much anywhere at Brian Saber, but on Twitter and Instagram, it's Brian_Saber because someone beat me to it. So thanks whoever that was.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thank you everybody for listening. From all of us here at United We Nerd, keep on nerding.
We are Cordyceps.
We are one.
Ready.